Hello and welcome everybody to the webinar on the role of water law in fostering water for peace. My name is Gabriel Eckstein, and I serve as the chair of the Executive Committee of the International Association for Water Law. Our association, in collaboration with UN Water, is hosting today's program, and we are delighted to have all of you join us for this important event. The International Association for Water Law is an international association composed of legal, policy, and technical professionals interested in the role of law, policy, and governance in the realm of freshwater resources. IDA, as it is known from its Spanish acronym, is dedicated to fostering the evolution, study, knowledge, understanding, and application of water law and policy at the national and international levels, with a view to improve the management of freshwater resources at the local, regional, national, and global levels. Our partner, UN Water, is an interagency coordination mechanism that facilitates engagement and cooperation among the various United Nations entities and international organizations working on water and sanitation issues. UN Water's role is to ensure that members and partners support each other to develop a coordinated response to water-related challenges around the globe. One of these efforts, the UN World Water Day Initiative, celebrates water and raises awareness for about the 2.2 billion people living without access to safe water. And it is this effort that is at the core of today's program. The objective of this webinar is to contribute to the UN World Water Day 2024 campaign of Water for Peace. In particular, in today's program, we will address how water law at the domestic and international levels has been used and can continue to be used to facilitate peace and collaboration around the world. Our goal today is to offer some insight into the roles that regulations, laws, and legal principles can contribute to good water cooperation and governance, and ultimately a more peaceful world. Our panelists, who come from a diverse background of law, hydrogeology, management, and policy, will provide an interdisciplinary perspective on this important topic of promoting and achieving peace through water. Before I introduce our first speaker, I want to remind you to please make sure that your microphones remain muted throughout the webinar. We want to make sure that everyone can hear our speakers clearly and without interference. If you have any questions that you would like to direct to any of the speakers, we encourage you to type them into the chat or the Q&A box. And if time permits, we will make every effort to have your questions considered by our speakers during the program. So now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Daniela Bostrom-Kaufe, who is a communications manager with UN Water.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. Thanks so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be here. And first of all, I really want to thank AIDA for organizing this webinar. I'm always so impressed with what the members of the UN Water Task Force World Water Day manages to do to build this knowledge and to inspire people to take action. If I look a bit tired, it's because World Water Day was super successful. It was on Friday, and I just want to start by saying that I hope that everyone had a great day. I had the pleasure of participating in several events in Geneva. Some of my colleagues were in New York, some were in Paris, and maybe some of you were actually in events around the world. And that's really what makes World Water Day so great. It can be celebrated everywhere by everyone because water is relevant to everyone everywhere. It's a unifying topic, as you would say. But because it's so common and universal, it also has its challenges. It's everywhere, and at the same time, it's nowhere. So when the water cycle works as it should, we just take it for granted, especially if we live in countries where, we have no issues that are visible all year round. But when water is unavailable or unaffordable, unusable, or just simply not there, it's starkly visible. So that's why we really need something like World Water Day. It's a day to make people aware of how to better manage our most precious resource, regardless if you work with, like you, shaping the laws of countries, or if you're in primary school. Everyone really has a role to play. So this year, the topic of World Water Day is Water for Peace, and UN Water, like Gabriel said, it's the UN's interagency collaboration mechanism for water and sanitation. And every year we propose a different theme for the campaign, but also then for the UN World Development Report that is then released on the 22nd of March. And I believe that one of my co-panelists will discuss or talk about that a bit later. So when UN Water chose the theme for peace for the 2024 campaign a few years ago, no one knew that it would be so timely. Today, we sadly meet against the backdrop of turmoil. Major wars are raging, climate change is worsening, and there's an unprecedented displacement and migration of people. On every continent, water pollution, scarcity, and unpredictability are increasing. Gabriel also mentioned some of the numbers. 2.2 billion people live without safely managed water, 3.5 billion without safely managed sanitation, and the effect on public health is profound. Unsafe water, sanitation, and hygiene are responsible for deaths of around 1,000 children under 5 every day. So if we just translate that into something else that's a bit more understandable, it's like 2 big airplanes, 2 jumbo jets, or the equivalent, crashing down every day. And I bet that would make the headlines, but sadly, water and sanitation, they just don't. So this World Water Day, the campaign on Water for Peace, was led by UNESCO and UNECE and coordinated by this UN Water Task Force that Gabriel spoke about. And it's really about raising awareness that water has the potential to create peace or spark conflict depending on our stewardship. In this context, water law emerges as a cornerstone of our efforts to manage, allocate, and protect this really precious resource by providing legal frameworks for equitable access, responsible management, and transboundary cooperation, for example. Water law serves as a catalyst for peace and sustainable development. So with this, some might ask, but what does water law really have to do with public awareness? And I think that we can say that it has a lot to do with public awareness, but it's just not completely there when you think about it the first time. So I'd like to show you through a few examples of what this campaign does, but also what other campaigns in previous years have done. So first and foremost, public awareness serves as the cornerstone for understanding rights and responsibilities concerning anything, and in this case, concerning our water usage, conservation, and protection. So by educating citizens about the legal frameworks governing water resources, we empower them to really make these informed decisions and adhere to regulatory standards. So when we crafted this campaign, we make this central to all the material, we translate it into all the official UN languages, and we disseminate it throughout the whole system so that tens of thousands of organizations, schools, communities that celebrate World Water Day can have access to that information. The preliminary results from the online engagement, again, the weekend has been busy looking into all of this. We've had around 2.7 million engagement. That's an umbrella term of likes, share, etc. And then the larger number of 40 billion, that's how many times World Water Day content was displayed to online users. So that's a really, really big number. So to that point, we can see that heightened awareness fosters support for policy initiatives aimed at sustainable water management and conservation measures. When the public is cognizant of the challenges facing our water systems, they're more inclined to rally behind efforts to enact and enforce effective laws that safeguard this precious resource. I have one very nice and quick example from my village. I live bordering Geneva in rural France, and I have a wonderful and nice neighbor who had a bit of a problem last year because she has a swimming pool. And we had a huge drought and she needed to fill up her swimming pool, but there were restrictions. So she felt a bit bad about this, and we were pondering, and me and my role, I was saying, don't do it. But she really needed to fill up her swimming pool to be able to enjoy it. But it just seemed that she had no choice. If she wanted to do it, she would just get a fine from the municipality if she was checked for it. But it wasn't until when her son came home, because I had given a presentation to him and his classmates about World Water Day, and I had given him an action list of what you could do. He came home and he put, social pressure on her. So with the social pressure from him and from the municipality, she managed to find another way to fill her swimming pool a bit later on. So what you can see here is that the plea to his mother about not filling it was actually as effective as the local laws. So in this example, we see that awareness transcends mere understanding. It really catalyzes this tangible behavioral change. And through our outreach campaigns, we can encourage individuals and communities to adopt water-saving practices and technologies and thereby mitigate the strain on this finite water supply. For example, we have a website that was created last year called Be the Change, where people can log their actions. And it's been quite popular, especially this 10-point action list that I just mentioned, that helps people make these small but impactful changes. So a well-informed population serves as a bulwark against malfeasance in water governance. By holding governments and water management authorities accountable for their actions, transparency is upheld, and the risk of corruption and or mismanagement are mitigated. And equally important is the role of this public awareness in promoting inclusive decision-making processes. If we engage citizens in consultations and community-based initiatives, policymakers can tap into this wealth of local knowledge and ensure that water governance reflects the diverse needs and perspectives of the people it serves. That's why we always try to really talk about these local stories throughout the campaign so that we can inspire others, but also make sure that people feel empowered by having their stories shared. Lastly, public awareness serves as a beacon for promoting equity and social justice in water governance. By highlighting the imperative of ensuring equitable access to clean and safe water for all, particularly marginalized and vulnerable communities, we uphold the principles of fairness and inclusivity in our water laws and policies. Ladies and gentlemen, public awareness is not merely a complementary aspect of water law and governance, it's actually at its very foundation. By empowering individuals and fostering collective action and promoting a culture of stewardship and responsibility, we can really navigate the complexities of water management with wisdom and with foresight. So if World Water Day is all about calling for action to tackle the water and sanitation crisis, then we have to create a movement in society. Every progressive shift we've ever seen in the world has mass public support. And that mobilization of public opinion creates an unstoppable momentum. People learn facts, they hear from those affected, and they exert pressure on people in power to do something about it. Human beings are storytellers. It's how we all make sense of the world and our own place with it. So thank you so much for organizing this webinar, and I wish you fruitful interactions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniela. That was a wonderful introduction to the theme, to the topic, and sort of lays a foundation for our conversation here today. I'd like to now move to our next speaker, Mara Tignino, who is with the Faculty of Law at the University of Geneva and with the Platform for International Water Law at the Geneva Water Hub. Mara, please.
Hello, good morning to everyone. So many thanks for Aida for organizing this webinar. I'm going to focus on a particular aspect of the relationship between water and peace. So no, as Daniela mentioned, no, in this moment to talk about water and peace, it is really no a crucial issue and something that unfortunately many countries around the world it is really challenging. So I will focus on some particular activities of the Geneva Water Hub dealing with the protection of water during and after armed conflict. So I would like to bring to your attention some elements of the current features of armed conflict. So unfortunately, we are increasingly seeing a use of water, an increasing use of water as a means and method of warfare. We have increasingly armed conflict taking place in cities that really has a strong impact on the access to water and the use also of explosive weapons that have long-term impacts on the access to water and also on the health situation of people. We have also the challenges related to non-international armed conflict. Let's, for example, think about the situation in Afghanistan and also protracted armed conflict. So conflict that last over also 3 or 4 decades. So here now I would like to share with you, probably now you are all aware of this attack against the largest hydropower dam in Ukraine that took place so on the 22nd of March. So here you can see how water has been used as a means of warfare. And here again in Ukraine, in last June we saw the incident of another explosion in the Nova Kavovka dam. So I will not go to the responsibility of these attacks, since there are no still judgment, but of course there is a question about the role of international law also to prevent this type of attack that have a strong impact on the civilians. And here, the situation in Gaza. So here it is a report that was published last December by PAX, and you can see the number of drinking water wells, water networks, wastewater treatment plants that are out of service in Gaza, and have so a huge impact on civilians. So what is the role of water law, of international law, in particular international humanitarian law and human rights law, in protecting the access to water for civilians? I know a case that we all probably followed in the news. It is a case brought by South Africa against Israel before the International Court of Justice. And so if you go to the judgment that was released in last January, so you can see that in the judgment there are reference, unfortunately, to water. So no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. So Gaza is in a situation of complete siege. And also there are some statements that were made by Israel before the court, saying that it was continuing to ensure water resources to Gaza. And it's interesting that if you read the separate opinion of Judge Adok Barak sitting in the ICJ, it makes reference explicitly to water. So so one of the conclusion of the court, it is not that there is a real and imminent risk of irreparable harm to the rights of Palestinians. And one of the requests made by the International Court of Justice, it is to provide basic services to the Palestinians. And interestingly, this was supported by 16 votes against one by the judges. So including the Israeli judge Adok was supporting this request made by the ICJ. So for giving you very briefly an overview of what international humanitarian law says, so you have both additional protocols on international and non-international armed conflict, protecting the object indispensable to the survival of the civilian population. So in particular, water supplies. Starvation is explicitly prohibited, and there is really different verbs that are used to protect the water supplies against attack. So a prohibition of attacking, destroying, removing, or rendering useless. And also rendering useless can be, for example, caused by also contamination, for example, of water resources that are not anymore drinkable. And then there are some exceptions that are included in the two additional protocols, and but this is really a small window of exception. Even when the water is used exclusively for combatants, there is a strict prohibition of starvation, and also to force the movement of the population. Then the other second big prohibition of the additional protocols are the works, is the protection against the attacks for installation containing dangerous forces like dams and dikes. In this case, even if they are military objectives, there is a strict prohibition of attacking them. So beyond the additional protocols, there are also general principles of international humanitarian law that protect water. So in the case, for example, that water become a military objective. So we have at the basis, so the principle of distinction. So all the time combatants must distinguish between civilian object and military objectives. There is also an obligation of proportionality. So when it becomes a military objective, you need, the military planners need to take into account the incidental damage to the civilians and the civilian objects. And also an obligation to take precautionary measures, so take all the feasible all the feasible precaution in the choice of the methods of warfare to avoid the harm to the civilian population. And then also one of the bases of international humanitarian law, it is the limitation on the means and methods of warfare. So there is the right of parties to an armed conflict. It is not unlimited in the choice of means and method of warfare. So, okay, we have this legal background, but unfortunately, we continue to see every day violations of international humanitarian law. So, for giving maybe some hopes, some hope for the future, it is important to highlight the current initiatives that also can change the current situation. So I would like to emphasize the first one, so the WIPA declaration that was adopted in 2002. So here, there is, for example, the need, the need to ensure a comprehensive training of armed forces. That is very important, to make understandable, what are the impacts of military action on the access to water, and also the restriction of using explosive weapons, especially in urban warfare. And here, I would like to highlight this aspect of the declaration, that it is to take into account the direct and indirect effects of attacks, so what we call the reverberating impacts caused by an attack on the supply of water. And then a second initiative that I think it is also important, it has been taken by the International Law Commission with the adoption of the principles on the protection of the environment in relation to armed conflict. So this document contains both customary international law and recommendation, and it takes a larger overview of international law, including also international environmental law and human rights law. And then some principles that I would like to highlight. It is, for example, the state responsibility. So the principles include that in the case of violation of customary or treaty law, there is a responsibility of states that is engaged, and also an obligation to repair for the damage, and also a general protection of the environment. And of course, water is also protected not only as an infrastructure, but also as a resource, so as a river, an aquifer. So there is also this obligation to protect the environment. And then I would like also to highlight the third initiative that was that is also taken by the Geneva Water Hub, that it is the Geneva Principles on the Protection of Water Infrastructure, where now we included a specific principle on the use of water as a means and method of warfare. Here you can see now that basically it is a recommendation. We use the verb should refrain because it is difficult not to go to an obligation given the current development of international law. And so now for concluding, I think really that for strengthening not is the protection of water during armed conflict, and also where now the Geneva Water Hub is working, it is the importance to take into account the reverberating indirect effects caused by the attacks against water and water-related infrastructure. So this is highlighted in the Geneva Principles and also in the WIPA Declaration, the importance of training, also the use of human rights mechanism to implement obligation of international humanitarian law, and the role of international criminal law like the International Criminal Court. So many thanks, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Mara, for that wonderful overview of international law as it relates to armed conflict, to laws of war, and how it intersects with freshwater resources. I think, as Daniela said, when they developed generated the theme for this year of Water for Peace, it wasn't contemplated at the time that it would be so important, given what's going on in the world today. So thank you for that great presentation. Let's move on to Engin Konkagul, who is a senior program specialist with UNESCO World Water Assessment Program. So Engin, please, you have the floor.
Gabriel, thank you very much. Hold on, let me start my video as well.
Yes.
First of all, I would like to echo what the previous speakers told. We really appreciate IDA organizing this webinar. It's very timely, and the theme, the topic is highly relevant to the international agenda. Similarly, last Friday was the World Water Day. This event was celebrated around the planet, and personally, I was a part of the preparation of the pivotal event in Paris, in UNESCO headquarters. We had over 300 participants who participated in person, and hundreds more participating online. This clearly shows that the World Water Day is celebrated not just for the sake of celebrating the World Water Day, but there is great momentum, not only coming from within the water community, but also those people who are working in other sectors. They really recognize the importance of the freshwater resources and the management of these precious resources to ensure the sustainability of not only this generation, but the generations to come. Once again, my name is Engin Koncagul, and I'm the process coordinator for the production of the United Nations World Water Development Report. This flagship report is published by UNESCO, but on behalf of UN Water, and its production is coordinated by my secretariat, the UNESCO World Water Assessment Program. And in this presentation, I will talk about the 2024 edition that we launched last Friday. And the focus of the report is water for prosperity and peace. The starting point of the report is that water resources underpins prosperity through health, education, employment, food, energy security, and life-sustaining ecosystems. And equitably sharing these benefits promotes peace. However, growing challenges such as climate change, geopolitical unrest, pandemics, mass migration, hyperinflation, and other crises have the potential to tip the balance towards conflict. The content of this flagship report is the result of collaboration between UNESCO, FAO, Habitat, UNIDO, OECD, and the regional economic commissions. We also benefited from inputs and contributions of other UN water entities, universities, NGOs, and more. Globally, water use is expected to grow by around 1% per year over the next 30 years. But this being said, already roughly half of the world's population currently experiences severe water scarcity for at least part of the year. And as mentioned earlier, 2.2 billion people are without access to safely managed drinking water. While growing population, increasing water demand in all sectors, and changing consumption patterns are among the reasons for shrinking water availability, a major issue that we need to pay close attention is declining water quality. In most lower income countries, over 90% of wastewater is discharged directly into the environment without any kind of treatment. Water has long been recognized as a driver of socioeconomic growth, but the empirical evidence to support this hypothesis, at least for us, has been quite difficult to establish. In fact, when we look at the GDP versus water availability, this is the diagram on your screen, we do not observe a clear correlation between the two variables. However, the chicken and egg situation that we see in middle and lower income countries is that they require economic growth in order to finance water development, and water development is required to develop and diversify their economies. Once the economic diversification is attained, this can help mitigate risks associated with water availability on specific sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, and other water-intensive industries. When we look at the link between water and jobs, we see that in low-income countries, an estimated 80% of jobs are water dependent, compared to only 50% or less in high-income countries, where the job market is more diversified and less reliant on water resources. This disparity is crucial in the context of climate change, posing an additional threat to employment in low and lower middle income countries, where agriculture and water-intensive industries are the mainstay of the labor force. When we first started drafting the 2024 edition of the World Water Development Report, one of the assumptions was that water contributes to peace by motivating cooperation and diplomacy in some direct or indirect way. However, later in the stages, we realized that the relationship between water and peace are difficult to define, especially when taking account of contributing factors such as equality and social justice. Disputes over water can occur when demand exceeds supply, when availability is compromised due to pollution, when access to water is restricted, or when water supply and sanitation services are disrupted. However, such disputes are most often local in nature. So the community-based water governance structures can help build and maintain peace. But if we talk about full-fledged war, water is typically not the cause of the war, but it has most often been a tool, a target, or a victim of a warfare. Unfortunately, in the recent past, there have been several events in which civilian water infrastructure has been targeted or water has been instrumentalized in violent conflicts. These acts are clearly against the international humanitarian law and specifically the Geneva Convention. Now, let us take a look at the major sectors to better understand the complex relationships between water, prosperity, and peace. Agriculture, which accounts for about 70% of global water use, drives prosperity and peace through sustainable growth, livelihoods, food security, and labor. Although food production has more than doubled in the last 30 years, 50% more food will be needed by 2050. So much of the next generation investments will need to focus on the sustainable intensification of agricultural production, supporting appropriate technologies and processes, which could be a combination of modern and traditional climate-proof methods to meet land and water-related SDG targets. In many countries, access to and use of water resources in rural areas is governed by customary arrangements and by a range of informal water tenure arrangements that can play a significant role in conflict resolution. Water supply, sanitation, and hygiene as a politically neutral service system can be leveraged as a platform for intercommunal collaboration and partnerships between citizens and government. However, the reality is that authorities have not given sufficient priority to providing these services, particularly across informal settlements and among marginalized groups. Inequalities in access to water and sanitation services can present barriers to socioeconomic stability and prosperity, creating tensions amongst and between communities. Disasters and conflict can disrupt water supply systems, increase the risk of waterborne diseases, and lead to population displacement, which has the impact on the most vulnerable, especially women, children, and persons with disabilities. Industry has the material, human, and financial capacity to increase economic prosperity. However, several industries such as food, textile, energy, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and mining have considerable impact on freshwater use and pollution. So decoupling water use and industrial productivity would improve both water availability and quality, and in parallel, minimize local tensions and confrontations between competing parties. Environmentally friendly and resource-conscious approaches would help companies to build and maintain positive image and favorable reputation in the public. The freshwater ecosystems are chronically undervalued in policies. We all know that. But this creates the vicious cycle of degradation and fragmentation of ecosystems that lose at an accelerated rate their capability to regulate water quality and availability. The consequences that we witness in our lifetimes is disputes over land and environmental resources, including conflicts between humans and wildlife. Ecosystem conservation or restoration offers some of the best prospects for conflict resolution and peace building. Addressing these various challenges will require policies and initiatives involving several actors working on different fronts. Among the first fronts that I would like to mention is science, technology, and information. Water resources cannot be effectively managed unless adequate data and information are available concerning the quality and availability of water across time and space. To obtain reliable hydrological data, there is the need to increase the number of gauging stations, particularly in underrepresented basins and environmentally vulnerable areas. This way, we can better capture increasing hydrological variability and human influence. In parallel, recent advances in information and communication technologies, remote sensing, advanced sensor equipment, and the rise of citizen science, supported by low-cost technologies, can benefit water management practices through improving data availability, its precision, and timeliness. While artificial intelligence has the potential to help increase the efficiency of water management systems, potential risks include system-wide failure due to cyber attacks and water-intensive nature of the IT networks that run AI programs. As an example, AI currently requires around half a liter of water to answer 10 to 50 queries. The second front line, of course, education and science and technology, they go hand in hand. So I would like to put emphasis on the fact that there is growing need for trained workforce with skills adapted to the new technologies for water treatment, sanitation, and integrated river basin management. And this also goes for enhancing and supporting legal, policy, and institutional frameworks. Cooperation over transboundary rivers, lakes, and aquifers can generate common livelihood, development, and cost-sharing opportunities that in turn deliver peace and prosperity at local, national, regional, and global levels. Unfortunately, only 32 out of 153 countries sharing transboundary waters have at least 90% of their transboundary basin area covered by an operational arrangement, and there are very few aquifer-specific agreements. However, increasing awareness and support of joint transboundary aquifer management is noticeable amongst international organizations. Now, I will skip the next two slides for the sake of time, so that I can conclude within 10 minutes. As I mentioned in the very first slide, sustainable water management generates a wide spectrum of benefits for all of us, ranging from health, food, and water security to a variety of ecosystem services. It's through these benefits that water leads to prosperity, and equitable sharing of these benefits promotes peace. So the choice between peace and conflict is completely within our hands. With this, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Engin. This is the World Water Development Report is really one of the highlights, work products from the entire UN system in terms of water, and highlighting these aspects of the report are really, really critical. And we really appreciate your participation, giving us this overview about the report today. We will now move into our second part of our program, which is the panel discussion. And Alicia Arali will serve as our moderator for this panel program. As many of you probably know, Alicia has had a long and illustrious career in the UN system, most notably as the chief of the groundwater section at UNESCO's International Hydrological Program. And now in retirement, she hasn't stopped. She's a very active member of the International Association for Water Law, and we very much welcome her contribution to this program. And Alicia will now introduce and moderate our panel.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gabriel. You are too nice. Yes, water is a passion of many of us here. We have not a lot of time, and the debate is so interesting. So let's go immediately with our panelists. The first one is Lindsay Blodgett. And hello. Lindsay, you are the principal consultant and founder of the Next Wave Consulting, but you was also the former president of the World Youth Parliament for Water. The view of this generation, this young generation, the next one generation, it's crucial. I mean, the water cooperation, law, and how we see our life. I mean, from your perspective, what are the key skills or competencies that young professionals should develop to effectively contribute to water-related peace-building efforts?
Yeah, thank you, Alicia, and thank you, Gabriel, and just for hosting this great webinar, such an important topic that I feel like my generation has a specific motivation to address. And really, I want to speak to the divide of senior professionals and youth. A lot of my career had been on voicing the youth perspective, and I think I find myself kind of at the end of that term, seeing that one of the best ways to engage youth is to build their capacity, not only in peace building efforts, but as we tackle at large the world water resources issues. So I want to speak into that, of how we can bridge those skills and competencies. Ingrid mentioned earlier about jobs being an important part of this puzzle. I think he highlighted that 80% of jobs in low-income countries are focused on water. That issue of building skills and competencies and building the next generation of people in the water workforce is actually a huge topic here in the US. It's the top 5 issue that's impacting our water resources. So I'm going to speak into 5 areas that I see that youth can build their competencies and skills as they're entering into this workforce. As I speak into that, if you're an educator, I'd like you to put on your lens of how you can help mentor and train these young people. And if you're in my position where you're a young professional or you're a student, put on the lens of how you can go out and kind of receive these skills. So the first one is just building your knowledge on your interdisciplinary knowledge between understanding the water energy environment nexus, as well as political and economics. These are all understanding the trade-offs that exist between these. Water can mean one thing, but then thinking about the energy context. And another knowledge is just that international law and policy. We have amazing professionals right here in Ada speaking on water and policy and law, but making sure you find training resources to understand policy context. In California, for example, that the landscape is so different than it might be over there in Switzerland or these other countries. And so just being hungry for these 2 general themes of knowledge would really help you as a young professional entering in the field. The second thing I want to speak into is being culturally competent and sensitive. This might seem just, that's what we should do. But from speaking from experience, when I joined the World Youth Parliament for Water and we went to the World Water Forum, in Brasilia, one of the things that we got to do is we got to actually go to an indigenous community in Brasilia. And this just opened up my mind so much. Not only was I there with young people from all over the world to experience this, but we got to go to these communities and we were involved in a ceremony where they actually planted trees, and they showed us how water was so important in their lifestyle and what it meant to them, that there was actually a ceremony attached to it. For me in my community, we have our landscapers, or we might plant a tree in our own garden, but for them, there was a whole ceremony around it. And I think understanding those rituals, the cultural context of water and what it means in other ways, and there's a lot of religious context as well, that these are important to communities. And I think the more that we are curious for those communities outside of ourselves, I think is really a bridge to help us understand issues outside of ourselves. So I encourage actually all of us to constantly be curious about cultures and contexts outside of our own perspective. The third point I'd like to mention is conflict resolution and negotiation skills. These are skills I would say that are best learned inside of maybe a classroom or a context or a mentor. Gabriel, I know, is a professor of law at Texas A&M and has an amazing coursework on this. And I should have taken more of your courses, Gabriel, while at A&M. But finding opportunities to learn these negotiation skills, I know that there's a lot of different kind of mock conversations or trials, anything you can get your hands on to build these negotiation skills. I've seen some really interesting like negotiation games. So anything that can kind of build those negotiation skills is a win. 2 more that I'd like to touch on is facilitation skills. This kind of goes with negotiation. This one for me, I feel like this is something that I've been trying to get my hands on learning more, especially as I host webinars and dialogues with young people, engaging them as well as decision makers, is learning how to communicate those complex ideas and to facilitate peaceful conversations. I just led a webinar with IWRA, and we talked about the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, and just even to facilitate conversation between those 2 high topics. It's a very important skill, and to make sure that the other person in both perspectives are heard. So learn facilitation skills. And the fifth point I'd like to leave for competencies for young people is just engage in your own community. I think the more that we find opportunities in context of engaging in our local water resources and understanding the context of our own community. I think that helps us become better global citizens. So those 5 things is building your knowledge in interdisciplinary and law. The second is your cultural competency. Third is building your conflict resolution and negotiation. 4, facilitation skills. And 5 would be a participant in your own community. And that's what I would like to leave with you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Definitely, interdisciplinarity is a key issue. There are too many silos between law, geology, hydrogeology, engineering, environmental studies, and we all need to understand each other, to build a common language. And these remind me when we started the preparation of the draft articles on the law of transboundary aquifers, where really we had to open a new way of understanding each other, engineers, hydrologists, and international law experts for during 8 years, and we succeeded. So when you want, you can do it. And of course, educations, and we will see with the other panelists your other 3 outputs there. I would like to call Stefano Burchi. He's here with us. Everybody knows Stefano, I suppose. He's the former president of AIDA, and one of the most known experts on domestic law. And this is exactly my question. What role do you see for domestic water law in support of peace and cooperation? Stefano.
Thank you, Alice, and thank you for inviting me to join this panel. To my mind, domestic water law has a very significant, if not crucial role to play in fostering peace and cooperation, not only at the level of relations among states, but also domestically, or perhaps not only domestically, but also at the level of relations among states. Domestically, because an effective legal stroke regulatory framework for the management, allocation, protection, wise use, and quality control, protection from pollution of the available water, freshwater stocks is critical, absolutely critical and essential to defuse, prevent conflict internally among, user groups and among user sectors of economic and social activity. It stands to reason that an effective legal framework where you have clearly defined rights and obligations, roles and responsibilities also for government in the administration of laws and regulations is absolutely critical to prevent and if they occur, resolve as peacefully as possible, as smoothly as possible, conflicts and tensions inside and among, user sectors or individual users and user groups inside any particular country. But domestic law also reverberates at the level of relations among states insofar as when it comes to the governance and the management, conservation, allocation, and protection from pollution of rivers, lakes, and aquifers that are common, shared, by 2 or more countries, which is the realm of international law, and not of domestic law, but of international law. Still, in order for international, bilateral, or multilateral obligations, rights and obligations to translate into action on the ground domestically at the level of each individual country that shares a particular river, a particular lake, a particular aquifer, then you need to have legal instruments in place domestically, i.e. legislation, domestic legislation, national legislation that is aligned with international transboundary obligations and that supports the implementation of those obligations domestically inside each particular country that is a party to a treaty or agreement or whatever concerning a river, a lake, or an aquifer that is shared with neighboring states. So I see for domestic law, and I conclude, essentially a dual role in promoting peace, preventing conflict, diffusing tension, and promoting peace, both at the domestic level, inside, and among, user groups and user sectors within any particular country, but also in a transboundary context where two or more countries are involved, in the sense of facilitating and the implementation of domestically of treaty obligations. Thank you very much, Alice.
Thank you, Stefano. I mean, I remember that I learned from you that domestic law harmonization is crucial when we are going to discuss about a transboundary aquifer or an international river between 2 or 3 countries that most probably have or no water law at all at national level, or domestic law that, as you say, are not able to support the international framework, the development of international framework. So definitely, I think this is a very good lesson for a practical approach on managing transboundary water bodies. And well, from river basin to aquifers, definitely I would like to have here, the floor, Gabriel de los Cobos. Gabriel, cooperation on the invisible resource, I think, is the most difficult one. The aquifers, the groundwater that is beneath the soil, we don't see it. And you have the experience of the best example that we all know, the Genovese aquifer. Your history in managing this aquifer in the last and more 20 years, the role of water, the role of science, how do you see that? What is your message there?
Yeah, thank you, Alice. Thank you for the invitation to this roundtable. If we take the example of Genovese Agreement, the first agreement of 1978 was pragmatic in showing that it was, above all, necessary to save the groundwater, the common groundwater resource, for the benefit of drinking water, beyond the purely political aspects of state sovereignty. This may shock lawyers today, but it was one of the bases of the success of this agreement, because on the one hand, in 1978, no international agreement existed, and on the other hand, the main goal was to stop overpumping by implementing a managing aquifer recharge system and setting rules for the use of the resource. So the situation changed in 2007 when it was necessary to renew the cross-border agreement. It was revised, taking into account the new legal instruments put in place in 1980. For example, the Madrid Convention or the Helsinki Convention in 1992. On this basis, the new agreement was based on the Karlsruhe Agreement of 1996. Its Article 5 allows the exercise of a mission to be delegated to one of the communities, which the French side absolutely wanted, in order to have management and decision-making at the local level. So the 2008 agreement was signed between the Canton of Geneva and 3 French communities involved at that time. Beyond the legal aspects in the agreement, it is important to emphasize that technical and scientific management with regard to the management and protection of this resource were essential points. Knowledge of the common resource must be a key point in the development of cross-border negotiations in order to preserve the resource in the quality, but also in the quantity of water. There is no point in adopting legal elements if the very basis of knowledge of water resources are not monitored. You know that groundwater is an invisible water resource, and we need to have field investigations to better understand the capacities of the groundwater, the direction of flows, the limits of the aquifer, the geology, the variation on levels and quality over time. This point on the value of data and their use was clearly demonstrated during the last global meeting on water in Paris in December 2022. I insist on this point because we are, even after so many years of collaboration between France and Switzerland for the Genovese aquifer, with a lot of question marks about the natural supply of the resources via the border zones. These points are part of the conditions linked to the project of the new Genovese agreement, which is in preparation now. It is on this aid to the understanding of groundwater flows that it is then possible to better supervise their common use through legal work. Once this has been developed and integrated into the global management of cross-border aquifers, it will be possible to provide a basis for the use of water in a vision of peace and not conflict. So this is my deep opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. There is a lot to learn in the Genovese aquifer management, and I really suggest everybody here to read all the literature that you have written on this topic. How to create a law to manage an environmental system. We do not have all the details, but we have to make a risk and do it very often. Laura Movilla is with us. Laura is the lecturer in public international law at University of Vigo in Spain. Well, you are in the academia and of course teaching, so you have a real mandate and role in sharing knowledge and creating new minds. I mean, behavior. What do you say to the student to explain how an international law can foster peace in a transboundary context? How do you convince them? How you create these new way of thinking?
Thank you, Alice, for your question and for having me in this fantastic webinar and roundtable. Well, the role of international law is going to be key in promoting that peace in a transboundary context. That is when we are talking about 2 or more states sharing international water courses, lakes, or transboundary aquifers. Even though we already know that generally speaking, there are more cooperative interactions than conflicts between states around water. Conflicts between riparian states may and do arise in practice over many things. They can be conflicts between users and uses from both sides of the border, about quantity or quality issues in cases of pollution that comes from one side of the border, because of the planning of the construction of certain infrastructures such as dams on one side of the border, or many other possible disagreements over the management of those shared resources. Basically, what I try to explain to my students is that international law is going to be there to provide states with binding standards of behavior, and also with mechanisms that first are going to help to prevent conflicts if states want to prevent them, or to prevent them to escalate. Second, international law is also going to provide mechanisms to settle conflicts if they finally arise. And third, international law is going to help in general to achieve better, more stable, peaceful, and cooperative relations between riparian states. In fact, cooperation it's the essence of the law of international watercourses. And international law is going to be able to develop these effects in practice. Of course, if riparian states have specific watercourses agreements in place, but also if they are parties to one of the two global conventions, the UN Watercourses Convention or the UNESC Water Conventions, or to both of them, or even if they are not parties to any of these kind of agreements, because the customary law of international watercourses, that it's those general practices that in this context have been accepted as law, even if they are not written anywhere, would be applicable in all cases. So that's why customary law is going to be very important in this context, and it's going to provide the states with both very basic substantive and procedural rules that are going to help them to achieve those more stable and cooperative relations, to settle those conflicts if they arise. And if those conflicts arise, international courts or international arbitral tribunals can also use these norms to settle those disputes. And substantive rules, the very well-known equitable and reasonable use, no harms, and so forth, are very important in this sense, but also, especially as I see them, the procedural rules as the notification and consultation on plan measures where there is a risk of significant harm, or prior environmental impact assessments, and so forth, are going to be key in practice to prevent those conflicts to arise and to try to ensure compliance with those substantive rules. If states have specific agreements in place, they can also provide for binding dispute mechanisms. They can provide for the establishment of joint bodies between the riparian states that are also going to help to prevent conflicts, to try to resolve them, or just to promote those more cooperative relations between the riparian states. So for all these reasons, I think it's very important to know these rules, these mechanisms, their potential to prevent and settle those possible disputes. And I really believe that as in any other fields in the international arena that we also explain in class, if international law is the language of the relations between states, in this case, between riparian states, we are going to have always better chances of having real cooperative and peaceful relations, in this case, between states sharing a watercourse. That's the main message that I try to transfer to my students. Thank you so much.
And I think it's a lot, and it's very much important. But at the same time, I hope there will be some of your students who are also engaging in understanding better natural resources and environment, and the challenge posed by changing climate change. And definitely that this is something that has to be considered, I think, quite soon. International law and and environmental issues. As an interdisciplinary, as Lindsay say at the very beginning of the panel, one of the crucial issues to have an interdisciplinary approach and not work in silos. Kevin Petersen, the GMI, the SADC GMI, the Groundwater Management Institute of the SADC. You are just now completing or have already completed a policy, legal, and institutional review of groundwater in the SADC. Very briefly, some of the outcomes and intervention measures to foster peace in the region from this review.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you for the opportunity to form part of this webinar. We are fortunate in SADC that we have the revised SADC protocol on shared watercourses, which is a key instrument designed to foster cooperation and sustainable management of shared watercourses. Supporting the implementation of the protocol, the SADC has created several institutions, including river basin organizations and also the SADC GMI, which is my institution. And the establishing the SADC GMI marked a significant achievement in advancing cooperation among nations sharing transboundary aquifers. Although the review looked at subnational, national policy, legal and institutional aspects, for the purpose of this discussion, I'll just focus on some of the transboundary considerations. Particularly what came out of the analysis was basically the need to kind of inculcate groundwater arrangements into river basin organizations. Although river basin organizations were initially designed to address cooperation on surface water, SADC GMI has launched several initiatives institutionalizing groundwater management and TBA cooperation within this organization. So basically, in partnership with member states and RBOs, we've launched several initiatives to foster groundwater policy legislation and institutional arrangements. So basically, our model for inculcating TBA management into RBOs include setting up memoranda of understanding with river basin organizations, establishing a multi-country cooperation mechanism for the RBOs to incorporate groundwater issues within the institution. What we've done is basically establishing groundwater technical committees with RBOs. Now, obviously, the review identified a number of gaps within the policy, legal, and institutional framework. Part of the aspect was basically one of the issues was that much of the kind of policies and strategies that was developed over the years was in the early 2000s and integrated water resource management practices or principles, but unfortunately things has moved on, and aspects related to groundwater and climate change and those type of aspects needs to be reflected in updating the policy and legal frameworks. So we're basically launching joint activities which include technical assessments of transboundary diagnostic analysis, strategic action planning, training, and then establishing what we call either livelihood projects or groundwater monitoring projects. To circumvent the misalignment of policy, legal, and institutional arrangements at transnational and national levels, because there is misalignment because there was never harmonization between the countries. So what we are trying to do is moving towards setting up, as previously mentioned, MOUs, but which focus then on aspects related to, for example, agreements on data sharing, joint monitoring and standards, and also other priority mechanisms for shared groundwater governance. And we are using the UN draft articles on the law of transboundary aquifers as our guiding principles in terms of setting up those type of mechanisms, because we feel that that provides a good basis for us to engage into. And as new bilateral and multilateral agreements are being put into place, we're obviously, as an institution, trying to influence the incorporation of groundwater aspects into the agreements. Thank you, Alicia.
Kevin, I am sure that all these will be injected in the conference that you are organizing, the SADC GMI Groundwater Conference that you are organizing, that will take place in Lesotho in November, I think. So definitely all the region, and it is an international, by the way, it's not only regional, it's an international conference. It's almost every year, organized almost every year. So I think there will be the really interesting to look at these examples. And well, this year there is also the IAH Davos conference on groundwater, and UNEC, UNESCO, and GMI also are working on the transboundary of the conjunctive management of transboundary of surface and groundwater. I mean, how to build a conjunctive management. This is an issue in which I think we need to study and to learn more. Last but not least, definitely, we are talking about tools for building peace and water cooperation. And the Convention on the Protections and Use of Transboundary Water Course and International Lakes, the Water Convention with the Secretary at the UNEC. Julia, well, we all would like to have more countries texting the convention. What you should say to convince countries to sign the convention, to come in the convention in order to prevent conflicts and help in building cooperations. I mean, we know that there is the Water Cooperation Coalition that is going on. Julia, tell us.
Thank you very much, Alicia. So we are getting there. The UN Water Convention that UNEC has an honor to service is a global legal framework for transboundary water cooperation, open for participation to all United Nations member states since 2016. Currently, it has 52 parties, but more than 20 countries are in the accession process, and about 130 countries regularly participate in the activities of the intergovernmental platform of the convention to accelerate transboundary water cooperation and increase political willingness and capacity. So the Water Convention contributes to peace and stability, and this is one of the key arguments to make countries succeed, because the convention outlines practical steps in day-to-day cooperation of the countries. And here I would like to make three key points: how the convention helps prevent disputes and how it contributes to peace and stability. So first of all, the Water Convention supports the development of specific basin agreements and basin institutions in challenging circumstances. In the past, for example, the Convention has supported the development of agreements on the Sava or on the Drin in southeastern Europe. Currently, support is provided to the development of the agreement on Senegal-Mauritanian Aquifer Basin, shared by Senegal, Mauritania, Gambia, and Guinea-Bissau. And also, we are providing support to development of the agreement on Luapula Basin, shared by the DRC and Zambia. Secondly, the Convention has a dedicated body tasked with providing practical assistance to countries in dispute prevention and conflict resolution. This body is called the Implementation Committee. It consists of 9 independent experts, lawyers, and water professionals who are there to actually help countries in overcoming difficulties in their practical cooperation. Very recently, the committee has had a very successful advisory procedure involving Montenegro and Albania, and the committee was able to provide a constructive advice to these 2 countries and also to facilitate financial support to enable these 2 countries to enhance their monitoring capacities as a way to prevent escalation of future disputes. And my third point is that the convention has a crucial role in progressive development of international water law. So through the development of soft law instruments on the most challenging aspects of transboundary water cooperation, the convention helps prevent conflicts and helps harmonization that Kevin was just talking about here. So in the recent past, we have worked on the handbook on water allocation in transboundary context that was adopted by the meeting of the parties 2 years ago. In the moment, work is progressing on the development of a guidance note on source to sea approach. And in the future program of work, we are hoping to tackle another challenging issue for transboundary cooperation, which is conjunctive management of transboundary surface waters and groundwaters. So the convention is there, and it's encouraging to see that more and more countries in various parts of the world see the value of the convention and engage in accession processes. And maybe let me come back for a second to what Stefano underlined. He was talking about the importance of domestic legislation that supports implementation of transboundary water agreements. And here, the Water Convention, although it is a multilateral environmental agreement, it directly contributes to strengthening national law and implementation. For example, now countries who recently became parties to the Water Convention are developing the national implementation plans with support of the Convention Secretariat to improve domestic legislation, domestic water management, and therefore transboundary water cooperation. Also, the convention has a new twinning program between recent parties to the convention and long-term parties, which is another instrument to help improve not only transboundary water cooperation, but also national implementation and national legislation. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Julia. I think, unfortunately, Gabriel, we have to follow the program, and well, I give the floor to you back.
Thank you. Yeah, and we are running a bit behind schedule, and I would like all of our participants to please turn on your videos and join us here. And if there are any particular questions from the audience, please add those questions to the chat or the Q&A box. I know that Samara already responded to some of the questions in the chat. We had one particular question in the Q&A, which I'll throw out to anybody here, and that is, how can we guarantee the laws are effectively applied and relevant in practice? If anybody wants to try to take that on.
I try.
Please.
But I think to go back to the point made by the Daniela at the beginning and also Laura, no, it is the awareness, the teaching at the university, and not to make awareness, no, about the existence, no, of these norms, rules, and mechanism. I think that this is really not the first step that all of us need to know the existing frameworks.
Anybody else like to Stefano, please.
My mind, it's a combination of everything that has been covered, by this panel. Mara alluded to the education, awareness raising, etc. And I would say also the input and serious participation of all stakeholders involved in the conceptualization of norms and regulations. And I'm talking about the domestic level. We are talking about domestically. So domestic rules, national legislation that need to be, I would say, adapted to, local needs and circumstances, while being at the same time forward-looking. So promoting peace and prosperity internally, but and there is no, I would say, there is no hard and fast rule and no guarantee that that good laws will be implemented, respected, and adhered to, except if you go through a process upstream of and downstream of the adoption of domestic laws.
So maybe let me ask a quick question to, and anybody please jump in if this strikes a chord with you. In front of us, we have a wonderfully interdisciplinary group of people from hydrogeology, from law, from policy management, and so on. But I think some of the challenges we face are that when we study law, when we study communications, when we study hydrogeology, we actually tend to study in silos. And then when we get together, we have a difficult time understanding each other. What do you see as the effort that needs to be done to try to build the bridges between these disciplines? Because we like to talk about interdisciplinarity, but how do we really achieve that? Because we do tend to study in our silos, but we know that we need to come together to achieve solutions. What do you think?
Somebody wants to
Maybe
answer.
Yeah, let me have a go at it. It comes down to education. It comes down to willingness. I mean, within my academic role, we're now teaching water diplomacy as part of a course, something that I, as hydrogeologist, have not been exposed to when I did my training. So the world are changing in terms of the type of courses, the type of programs that we're starting to offering, and hopefully it becoming more relevant. And it also speaks to our, what's the word, peer pressure or pressure from our stakeholders to force us to engage on matters that is important to them. I cannot only focus now on the fact that I'm a hydrogeologist. If I want to provide water to people or communities, there are many other dimensions to it. I'll leave it there.
Daniela, please.
Thanks. That's such a great question. I think there's something around our professional identities and how proud we are as hydrogeologists or lawyers or communicators. And there's something around that also makes us want to hold very tight to our profession and say, I'm the expert, no one else comes near. So something that I say to my fellow communicators oftentimes is that we should be so inspired by the IT people. I mean, who here have been crawling under their desks to plug in their computers and try to make things work? It's not, you don't have to call IT and say, I need your help. They're like, do it yourself. And it's the same with finance. We do our own budgets. Whereas, we could also say, finance people come and do my budget, and we don't. So that's something that in communications, at least, I tell my fellow communicators that we should try and say, everyone can do a press release. Everyone can communicate. Go ahead, just try it around. And I think that actually helps us to maybe approach this more interdisciplinary way of seeing things. But that's just a bit of a philosophical thinking. Thanks, Gabriel.
All right. Well, thank you. I think we're going to have to call it a day. As we've heard today, water is critical for peace and cooperation around the world. It is also, it's fundamental, not only for life, but also for development and sustainability. And despite the challenges that we see around the world today, water has more often been a driver of peace and cooperation than of conflict. So if you take only one point from this program today, it is that peaceful coexistence is inextricably linked to our freshwater resources. In so many ways, access to fresh water underpins our ability to engage with each other, to understand each other, and to pursue cooperation. So as we close this webinar, I want to thank all of our speakers and panelists for their invaluable contributions to this lively and timely program and discussion. I want to thank UN Water for joining with the International Association for Water Law to co-host this webinar. And for those of you who are interested in to learn more about these various organizations, International Association for Water Law, UN Water, the World Water Day Initiative, I've just placed the links in the chat. Thank you all for joining us today. I wish you all a peaceful rest of your day and week.
Hello, bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, everyone.